Settle in. Tonight, we're journeying back, far beyond the world of cowboys and saloons, to a time even more raw and unforgiving. We're peeling back the layers of Hollywood fantasy, the fairy tales of chivalrous knights and merry peasants, to reveal the true face of the Middle Ages. You might think you have what it takes, that your modern resilience could see you through, but trust me, the medieval world was a different kind of beast. If you're finding value in these deep dives into the past, I'd be incredibly grateful if you'd drop a like or even subscribe. It genuinely helps this channel grow more than you know. I'm always fascinated by where this community listens from, so if you feel like it, leave a comment with your city and what time it is for you right now. It's amazing to see our little group connecting across the globe through these stories. Now, dim your lights. Maybe light a candle for the proper ambiance. Let that modern world fade away, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. We're going to explore, in vivid detail, exactly why you wouldn't last a single day in medieval times. Congratulations, you've just opened your eyes in the 14th century. Let's say England. The good news? You're about to experience one of the most formative periods in human history firsthand. The bad news? Your survival instincts are about to be tested in ways you cannot possibly imagine. The first challenge isn't a person or a beast, it's the air itself. Before you even see your surroundings, you smell them. This isn't the pleasant, earthy aroma of a forest or a field. This is a thick, complex, and overwhelmingly pungent assault on your senses. It's the smell of wood smoke, yes, but it's also the smell of damp stone and moldering timber. It's the scent of unwashed bodies and clothing, a greasy human odor that has seeped into the very walls. If you're in a peasant's dwelling, it's the smell of the livestock that shares your home, a chicken roosting in the corner, a pig snuffling in its pen. It's the faint, ever-present tang of manure and human waste from the midden pile just outside the door. Your modern nose, accustomed to sanitation and deodorant, is completely unprepared for this olfactory barrage. As your eyes adjust to the gloom, you take in your new home. There are no windows, not in the way you understand them. There might be a single, small opening in the wall, covered with a greased piece of cloth or a wooden shutter, allowing only the faintest gray light of dawn to filter through. The room is a single, multi-purpose space. The floor is packed earth, cold and damp against your bare feet. In the center of the room is a hearth, a simple fire pit with a hole in the roof above to let the smoke out. It doesn't work well. The room is hazy with smoke, making your eyes water and your lungs burn. This isn't romantic. It's a constant, low-grade respiratory irritant. You slept on a bag stuffed with straw, laid out on a rough wooden platform. It's not a mattress. It's scratchy, it's lumpy, and it's almost certainly home to a population of fleas, lice, and bedbugs. You'll spend a good portion of your day, every day, itching. The concept of a private bedroom doesn't exist here. You sleep in this one room with your entire family, parents, children, grandparents. There is no privacy, no quiet corner to retreat to. Personal space is a luxury that won't be invented for centuries. You're cold, deeply, bone-achingly cold. Even in summer, the stone and earth dwellings retain a chill. In winter, it's a constant battle for survival. The fire might have been banked overnight, but it provides scant warmth. There is no central heating, no thermal underwear, no down comforter. You sleep in your day clothes, and you wake up still wearing them. The damp seeps into everything, making your joints stiff. You stand up, your body protesting. Every muscle aches, and you haven't even started the day's work yet. This isn't the pleasant soreness of a good workout. This is the chronic, grinding pain of a life filled with relentless physical labor, poor nutrition, and constant exposure to the elements. You are already exhausted, and the sun has barely risen.
Your stomach clenches with a hollow hunger. It's time for breakfast. Forget everything you think you know about the first meal of the day. There is no coffee. Let that sink in for a moment. No rich, aromatic brew to jumpstart your brain. No orange juice, no cereal, no bacon and eggs sizzling in a pan. If you're a peasant, your breakfast is likely a piece of coarse, dark bread, perhaps dipped in a thin, weak ale called small beer. The bread is dense, gritty. You can feel the husks of the grain between your teeth. It's not particularly flavorful, and it's tough to chew. This bread isn't the fluffy sliced loaf you're used to. It's made from a mixture of grains, like rye, barley, and oats. Wheat is for the wealthy. And because of the primitive milling process, your bread contains a significant amount of grit and stone dust from the millstones. You are literally slowly grinding down your teeth every time you eat. You might have a bowl of pottage. This is not a hearty, vegetable-filled stew. It's a thick, porridge-like substance that simmers in a pot over the fire for days, weeks, even months. New ingredients are added as they become available, but the base remains. It's primarily made from grains, with the occasional addition of a few seasonal vegetables like onions, leeks, or cabbages, and maybe a scrap of salted meat or bacon for flavor if you're lucky. It's monotonous, nutritionally limited, and utterly bland by modern standards. Salt is a valuable commodity, and spices like pepper are unimaginable luxuries, worth more than their weight in gold. As you eat, you look at your hands. They are already dirty, the nails rimmed with grime. The concept of washing your hands before a meal doesn't exist. The concept of daily bathing is viewed with deep suspicion by the church, which often associates excessive cleanliness with vanity and sin. Water is not trusted. It's often seen as a carrier of disease. You might wash your face and hands occasionally, but a full body bath is a rare event, perhaps once or twice a year. Your body is covered in a fine layer of sweat, dirt, and grease. Your hair is lank and itchy. This isn't a choice. It's the reality of life without running water, without soap as you know it, and without the cultural imperative to be clean. You pull on your shoes if you're fortunate enough to own a pair. They are simple, made of rough leather, and they don't have a right or left foot. They are uncomfortable. They offer little protection from the elements, and they are falling apart. You are acutely aware of the cold, hard ground beneath your thin soles. Before you step outside, you take a deep breath, not of fresh air, but of the smoky, fetid air inside. You are about to face the medieval day, and it has only just begun. The world outside your door is vast, beautiful, and utterly merciless. The weather is not a topic for small talk. It is a matter of life and death. A sudden rainstorm could ruin the harvest. A harsh winter could mean starvation. There is no weather forecast, no emergency services, no safety net. You are on your own, a small, vulnerable creature in a world that is largely indifferent to your survival. Stepping outside, the sheer quiet is deafening. There is no hum of electricity, no distant traffic, no airplanes overhead. The sounds are natural, immediate, and often threatening. The wind in the trees, the call of a crow, the distant lowing of a cow. It's a silence that feels heavy, pregnant with unknown dangers. The landscape is both familiar and alien. The fields are divided into narrow strips, and the forest in the distance is a dark, impenetrable place, home to wolves, boars, and outlaws. It's a place of wonder and deep fear. The village is not a picturesque collection of cottages. It's a small, cramped cluster of buildings along a single, muddy track. The mud isn't just dirt and water. It's a churning mixture of animal dung, human waste, and rotting garbage. There are no sewers, no trash collection. The waste from the houses is simply thrown into the street. The stench is overpowering, and flies swarm in thick clouds. In the summer, the heat bakes this filth. In the winter, it freezes, and in the rain, it becomes a knee-deep morass. This is why disease is a constant, lurking specter. The connection between this filth and illness is not understood. It's simply accepted as part of life, a cross to bear.
As you walk through the village, you see your neighbors. They look old, far older than their years. A man of 40 is considered elderly, his face a roadmap of hardship, his back permanently bent from a lifetime of labor in the fields. His teeth are rotten, blackened stumps, and his breath is foul. He is missing a finger, lost in a farming accident years ago. He is one of the lucky ones. He survived the infection. Children, dressed in miniature versions of adult clothing, work alongside their parents. There is no childhood in the modern sense. As soon as they are physically able, they are put to work, scaring birds from the fields, gathering firewood, minding younger siblings. Their bellies are often distended from malnutrition, and many bear the scars of smallpox or other diseases. You see the Lord's manor house on the hill, a stark reminder of the social order. You are a peasant, tied to this land, to this Lord. You owe him labor, a portion of your grain, your obedience. In return, he offers protection of a sort, and the right to work the strips of land that allow you to barely feed your family. There is no upward mobility. You were born into this station, and you will die in it. Your children will inherit your place. This is not a society of individuals, but of orders and estates. You know your place, and to step outside of it is to invite ridicule, violence, or worse. The church bell tolls, marking the hours of the day not by numbers, but by prayers. The sound is deep, resonant, and omnipresent. The church is the center of life, not just spiritually, but socially and politically. It dictates the rhythm of the year with its feast days and fasts. It teaches that this life of suffering is a mere preparation for the next. Your suffering has a purpose. It is a test from God, a punishment for sin, a way to purify your soul for the afterlife. This belief is what allows people to endure the unimaginable. To question the church is not just heresy, it is to threaten the very fabric of the universe as they understand it. The world is not a random collection of atoms, it is a divine creation filled with meaning, miracles, and demons. An unexpected illness might be the work of a witch. A good harvest is a sign of God's favor. There is no separation between the natural and the supernatural. The world is alive with spiritual forces, both benevolent and malevolent. Your day is just beginning. The sun is a little higher now, but the chill hasn't left the air. You have hours of back-breaking labor ahead of you. Your body already aches. Your stomach is far from full, and your mind is reeling from the sensory overload and the psychological weight of this new reality. You haven't faced violence or plague or the brutal justice of the manor court. You've just woken up. And already, the medieval world has pushed you to your limit. This was just the first hour. The long, hard day stretches out before you, each moment a fresh challenge to your modern sensibilities and your very survival. The real struggle is only just beginning.
The morning's hunger is a dull, persistent ache, the feeling you will become intimately familiar with. Let's follow that thread and truly understand what it meant to eat in the Middle Ages. This is not about feasts in great halls. That was for a tiny, privileged fraction of the population. This is about the relentless, daily struggle to fill your belly. Your breakfast of coarse bread and thin ale has done little to satiate you. You think about lunch, but the concept is fluid. There is no designated lunch hour. You will eat when there is a brief pause in work, and you will eat what is available, which is almost always the same as what you had for breakfast. The medieval diet was a study in monotony and nutritional deficiency. Your entire existence, your energy levels, your health, and even your height were dictated by what you could grow, raise, or forage within a few miles of your home. Let's talk about bread again, because it was the absolute cornerstone of survival, making up anywhere from 60 to 80% of the average peasant's caloric intake. That dark, gritty loaf you ate, it was dark because the flour was milled from whatever grains could be grown in the local soil, often a mix of rye, barley, and oats. Wheat was for the wealthy because it was harder to grow and produced less yield. The milling process was crude. The millstones, powered by water or animals, slowly ground the grain, but they also shed fine particles of stone into the flour. This meant with every mouthful of bread, you were consuming tiny abrasive fragments. Over a lifetime, this constant low-level intake of stone dust ground down tooth enamel to nothing. By the time a medieval person reached their 30s, their teeth were often worn down to the gums, riddled with cavities from the lack of hygiene, and constant pain from exposed nerves. Dental care was non-existent. A toothache was treated with prayers, charms, or, in extreme cases, a crude extraction by the local blacksmith using a pair of pincers, often leading to fatal infections. And then there was the threat of ergotism, known then as St. Anthony's fire. Ergot is a fungus that grows on rye, a very common grain for the poor. When consumed, it causes horrific symptoms, convulsions, spasms, psychotic delusions, and a burning sensation in the limbs as the blood vessels constrict, often leading to gangrene and the loss of fingers, toes, or entire limbs. An outbreak could decimate a village, and they had no idea it was the very bread that was saving them from starvation that was also poisoning them. They attributed it to divine wrath or demonic possession. Your pottage, that ever-simmering pot over the fire, was the other pillar of your diet. It was a thick, porridge-like gruel. Its base was oats or barley, and it was kept cooking for days, even weeks. Each day, whatever scraps were available would be thrown in, a handful of peas or beans, an onion, a leek, a turnip, the leaves of some edible weed foraged from the edge of the field. Meat was a rare and precious addition. When an animal was slaughtered in the autumn because there wasn't enough fodder to keep it alive through the winter, every part was used. The meat was heavily salted or smoked to preserve it.
This preserved meat was tough, stringy, and so salty it made you desperately thirsty. It was added to the pottage in tiny, flavoring amounts. There was no refrigeration. You lived in a constant state of low-grade food poisoning. Meat, even preserved, would often be on the edge of spoilage. Vegetables, if not eaten immediately, would wilt and rot. Your stomach was in a perpetual state of unease, and bouts of dysentery and other foodborne illnesses were a regular feature of life. The lack of variety led to severe nutritional deficiencies. Scurvy, caused by a lack of vitamin C, was a common affliction, especially in late winter and early spring, when stored grains were running low and no fresh fruits or vegetables were available. Your gums would bleed, your teeth would loosen, old wounds would reopen, and you would be plagued by a profound, bone-deep lethargy. They didn't know it was a lack of fresh greens causing this. They saw it as another mysterious seasonal malady. Rickets from a lack of vitamin D caused bowed legs and skeletal deformities in children. Pellagra from a lack of niacin found in fresh meat and vegetables led to dermatitis, diarrhea, and dementia. You were not just hungry, you were malnourished on a cellular level, your body slowly breaking down from the inside out.
Speaking of thirst, you drank ale. Everyone did, including children. Why? Because water was often unsafe. Rivers and streams were the same places used for washing, for dumping waste, and for watering livestock. They were breeding grounds for typhoid, cholera, and dysentery. Ale, however, was brewed with water that had been boiled, killing the pathogens. It was weak by modern standards, with a very low alcohol content, perhaps 1 to 2%, but it was caloric and hydrating. It was a vital source of calories and nutrients, a liquid bread. You drank it throughout the day, from morning until night. The idea of drinking a glass of water was seen as slightly reckless, something only the truly desperate would do. Spices were the stuff of dreams. Pepper, cinnamon, cloves, nutmeg. These were not just flavorings, they were symbols of immense wealth and power, traded along perilous routes from the Far East. A single peppercorn was worth its weight in silver. A sack of pepper could buy a man a ship. For you, the peasant, flavor came from salt, which was expensive but necessary for preserving meat, and from locally grown herbs like parsley, sage, and thyme, if you were lucky enough to have a small garden. Your food was not seasoned, it was merely edible. The seasons dictated everything. The late summer and autumn were times of relative plenty after the harvest, but this was followed immediately by the anxious work of preservation, salting, smoking, drying, and brewing to prepare for the long, lean months ahead. Winter was a time of gnawing hunger. The pottage became thinner, the bread harder, the ale weaker. By early spring, stores were often depleted, and the new crops were still months away. This was the hungry gap, a time of genuine famine when people were reduced to eating bark, grass, and seed grain meant for planting. Starvation was a real and ever-present threat. A failed harvest didn't just mean hardship, it meant death for the weakest in the community, the very young and the very old. Even for the nobility, the diet was not what the movies show. Yes, they ate more meat, venison from the hunt, pork, poultry, but it was still preserved with vast quantities of salt. Their bread was whiter, made from expensive wheat flour, but it was often stale. The grand feasts depicted in films were rare,
special occasions, not daily life. And their food was heavily spiced, not just for taste, but to cover the flavor of meat that was well on its way to going off. So, as you feel that familiar hunger pang a few hours after your meager breakfast, understand its depth. It's not just a signal that it's time for a snack. It's a constant whispering reminder of your fragility. Your body is running on poor fuel, lacking the essential vitamins and proteins to repair itself. Your teeth hurt, your stomach is unsettled, and your energy is already flagging. You are chronically, systemically undernourished. This isn't a diet you can power through for a day. This is the baseline condition of your existence. Every task, every movement requires overcoming this fundamental deficit. The medieval body was a machine perpetually on the brink of breakdown, fueled by grit, gristle, and prayer. And the day's work, the true test of your body's limits, has not even properly begun. The sun is higher now, climbing towards its zenith. The chill has burned off, replaced by a damp warmth. The village is fully awake, and the sounds of labor are everywhere. The rhythmic thunk of an axe splitting wood, the screech of a saw, the low, patient commands to an ox. Your own body is being called to its purpose. It is time to work. Forget the romantic image of the happy peasant whistling as he tills the soil. This is backbreaking, soul-crushing, and dangerous drudgery. Your body is not your own. It is a tool, the primary engine of your survival, and it will be used until it breaks. If you are a peasant, your life is dictated by the land and the Lord. You are likely a serf tied to the manor. You don't own the land you work. Instead, you work strips of land scattered across the great open fields that surround the village. In return for the right to farm these strips for yourself, you owe the Lord a portion of your grain and, most demandingly, your labor. This is the corvée, unpaid labor on the Lord's own demesnes lands. For 2 or 3 days a week, every week, you are not working for yourself or your family. You are working for Him. You are plowing His fields, harvesting His crops, shearing His sheep, digging His ditches. This is not optional. It is your duty, and failure to perform it means fines, imprisonment, or worse. The tools you use are primitive, heavy, and inefficient. The plow is a massive wheeled contraption, often pulled by a team of oxen, if the village is wealthy enough to own them. Guiding this beast and the plow through the dense, clay-heavy soil is a test of sheer strength and endurance. It jars your spine with every step, the wooden handles rough and splintered in your hands. You are bent double for hours on end. There are no ergonomic grips, no safety features. A sudden lurch from the oxen could break an arm or a leg. A slipped blade could sever a tendon. The work is constant. After plowing comes sowing, scattering the precious seed by hand, then weeding endlessly, then harvesting with a small handheld sickle. This is perhaps the most grueling work of the year. You are bent over at the waist, swinging the sickle rhythmically, gathering the stalks. The stubble cuts your hands. The sun beats down on your back. You do this from first light until last light, for days on end, because the harvest must be brought in before the weather turns. There is no time for rest. The entire village works together, a desperate race against time and the elements.
And this is just the grain. There is also the livestock to tend. The animals are smaller, scrawnier than their modern counterparts. You have to lead them to pasture,
protect them from wolves, muck out their stalls, milk the cows and shear the sheep. Every task is manual, physical, and repetitive. There are no machines, no power tools. Your body is the machine. If you are not a farmer, your work is no less demanding. The blacksmith works in a hellish forge, breathing in coal dust and metal fumes, his hearing damaged by the constant hammering, his body scarred by burns and flying sparks. The carpenter faces the risk of losing fingers to a chisel or saw. The mason heaves heavy blocks of stone, his lungs filling with fine, destructive dust. The baker works in an inferno of an oven, his body perpetually dehydrated. The tanner works in the most foul-smelling conditions imaginable, using urine and animal feces to treat hides, his hands permanently stained and raw. For women, the labor is double. In addition to working in the fields alongside the men during peak seasons like planting and harvest, they are responsible for all domestic labor. This is not just cooking and cleaning. It is an endless cycle of production. They are the ones who turn the grain into flour, grinding it by hand with a quern stone, an hours-long, exhausting task that produces the gritty flour for your bread. They are the ones who brew the ale, a complex, days-long process. They make the cheese, churning butter, curing and smoking meat. They spin wool into yarn using a drop spindle, a monotonous task that occupies every spare moment. They weave the yarn into cloth on a heavy wooden loom. They make the family's clothing, sewing every stitch by hand. They care for the children, who are underfoot and vulnerable to 100 different dangers. They haul the water from the well or stream, a heavy, back-straining job that must be done multiple times a day. There is no respite. Their workday begins before dawn and ends long after dark. There are no weekends. There are no vacations. There is only the liturgical calendar of the church, which provides the only official breaks from work on major feast days. Your body has no time to recover. The constant repetitive strain leads to chronic conditions, arthritis in the hands and knees, spinal deformities, hernias from heavy lifting. A minor injury, a sprain, a cut, or broken bone does not heal properly. It becomes a permanent disability, a lifelong pain that you must work through regardless. You age rapidly. By 25, you look middle-aged. By 40, you are old, your body a ruined testament to a lifetime of toil. The psychological toll is immense. Your world is tiny, limited to the horizon you can see from your village. Your life is predetermined. You will do what your father did, and your children will do what you do. There is no concept of finding your passion or career advancement. There is only work, sleep, and prayer. The sheer monotony, the lack of agency, the constant grinding pressure of survival would break the modern psyche, accustomed to stimulation, choice, and the promise of leisure. You are a beast of burden, and the whip of necessity is always at your back. As the sun climbs to its peak, you feel not the satisfaction of a morning's work well done, but the deep, terrifying knowledge that you are only halfway through the day, and that tomorrow and every day after for the rest of your short life will be exactly the same. The weight of this reality is heavier than any sack of grain you will ever lift. The sun is high now, and the sweat is pouring from your brow, stinging your eyes and tracing clean lines through the grime on your face and arms. This grime is your new normal. The concept of hygiene, as you understand it, is not just absent, it is fundamentally alien to the medieval world. You are not just dirty, you are living in a state of symbiotic filth with your environment. The air you breathe, the water you drink, the clothes on your back, and the very ground beneath your feet are all part of a complex ecosystem of bacteria, parasites, and decay. Let's start with your body. The idea of a daily shower is a fantasy from another universe. Water is not for cleaning. It is for drinking, cooking, and, when absolutely necessary, a cursory rinse. The Church Fathers often preached that subjugating the flesh included neglecting its cleanliness, viewing excessive bathing as a gateway to vanity and sin. Saint Benedict famously stated that, "To those who are well, and especially to the young, bathing shall seldom be permitted." A full-body bath was a rare and often uncomfortable event. The wealthy might have a wooden tub brought into their chambers a few times a year, filled with water heated over a fire. For you, the peasant, it might happen once a year, in the summer, perhaps in a river if the weather was warm. The rest of the time, you are what is euphemistically called dry clean. You might wipe your face and hands with a damp cloth in the morning, but that is the extent of your ablutions. The consequences are, to a modern sensibility, horrifying. Your skin is a landscape of dirt, sweat, and sebum. It itches constantly. This is not a mild annoyance. It is a sign of infestation. Lice are your constant companions. They live in your hair, your eyebrows, your pubic hair, and in the seams of your clothing. You can feel them crawling, biting. You develop a habitual, unconscious scratch. At night, you can sometimes pick them out, cracking them between your fingernails, but it's a futile battle. They are always there. Fleas jump from the straw of your bedding, from the animals that share your home, onto your body, leaving behind small, red, itchy welts. Bedbugs emerge from the cracks in the walls and the stuffing of your mattress to feast on you as you sleep. Your hair is lank, greasy, and matted. It is often covered with a coif or a scarf, not just for modesty, but to contain the mess and the pests. Washing it involves using a crude, lye-based soap made from animal fat and wood ash. It is harsh, it stings your eyes and skin, and it leaves your hair feeling stiff and straw-like. It's a process so unpleasant, it's undertaken only when absolutely necessary. Your scalp is likely covered in dandruff, sores from scratching, and perhaps even ringworm, a fungal infection that creates itchy circular patches. Then there is the sanitation crisis. There are no toilets. There is a privy and outhouse over a deep pit at the edge of the village, or perhaps just a designated midden heap. In a castle, there might be garderobes, small rooms projecting from the walls with a hole that empties into a cesspit or straight down the castle walls into the moat. The stench is unimaginable. Human waste is not treated or processed. It accumulates. Gong farmers are occasionally paid to empty these pits, a job considered so vile it was done only at night. But for the most part, the waste just sits, festering, seeping into the groundwater. This leads to the single greatest killer of the Middle Ages, contaminated water. The river that flows past your village is the source of life and death. It is where you draw your drinking water. It is where you wash your clothes, your cooking pots, and your animals. It is where the runoff from the midden heaps and the drainage from the latrines ends up. It is a swirling cocktail of bacteria, E. coli, cholera, and typhoid. You drink this water in the form of ale because the brewing process involves boiling, which kills the pathogens. But cross-contamination is constant. Your hands are covered in dirt and fecal matter from using the privy or working the fields fertilized with night soil. You wipe your hands on your tunic, and then you tear a piece of bread with those same hands and eat it. This is how dysentery, the flux, becomes a regular feature of life. It causes severe, bloody diarrhea and dehydration, killing the weak, especially children and the elderly, with terrifying speed. This constant state of filth and contamination is the breeding ground for disease on a catastrophic scale. But when illness strikes, the medical care available would terrify you more than the disease itself. Medieval medicine was a bizarre and often deadly mixture of classical theory, folk superstition, and outright butchery.
The foundation of all medical knowledge was the theory of the four humors, inherited from the ancient Greeks. It was believed that the body contained four vital fluids: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Health was a balance of these humors. Sickness was an imbalance. Diagnosis involved examining a patient's urine, its color, consistency, and even taste, and feeling their pulse. Treatment was aimed at restoring balance, usually by expelling the excess humor. The most common treatment was bloodletting. The physician, or more likely the barber surgeon, the same man who cut your hair and pulled your teeth, would open a vein, often in your arm, and drain a significant amount of blood into a bowl. The amount was determined not by science, but by the phases of the moon and the patient's astrological sign. This was done for everything from a fever and a headache to the plague. It weakened an already ill patient, often fatally. Another standard treatment was purging, using powerful herbal laxatives or emetics to induce violent vomiting and diarrhea, further dehydrating and exhausting the patient. Leeches were applied to suck blood from specific parts of the body. If you had a wound that became infected, which was almost a certainty, the treatment was poultices. These were moist, warm masses of bread, herbs, dung, or other substances applied to the wound. The theory was that they would draw out the poison. In reality, they introduced more bacteria, sealing in the infection and almost guaranteeing gangrene. Surgery was a last, horrific resort, performed without anesthesia. The patient might be given a mixture of herbs like henbane or mandrake, or simply large quantities of alcohol to induce a stupor, but they were almost certainly conscious. Amputations were performed with a saw on a restrained, screaming patient. The stump was then cauterized with a red-hot iron to stop the bleeding, an agony beyond description. Survival rates were abysmal, not just from the shock and blood loss, but from the inevitable infection that followed. The surgeon's tools were rarely, if ever, cleaned properly. The concept of germs was 5 centuries in the future. He would wipe his blade on his apron, still caked with the blood and gore of his last patient, and move on to the next. And then there was the plague. The Black Death, which swept through Europe in the mid-14th century, killed an estimated 1/3 to 1/2 of the entire population. But plague was not a one-time event. It was a recurring nightmare. Bubonic plague, carried by fleas on rats, caused swollen, painful lymph nodes called buboes in the groin and armpits, which would turn black and burst, followed by fever, vomiting, and death, often within a week. The pneumonic form spread through the air, attacked the lungs, and was almost always fatal within days. Medicine was powerless. Doctors, wearing beaked masks filled with fragrant herbs to ward off the miasma or bad air they believed caused the disease, could do nothing. They lanced the buboes, applied poultices of dried toads, or prescribed potions of crushed emeralds. Nothing worked. The response was often sheer, panicked flight, or a turn to extreme religious fervor, with processions of flagellants whipping themselves in public to atone for the sins they believed had brought God's wrath upon the world. Towns were sealed off, the healthy trapped inside with the dying. Families abandoned their sick loved ones. The social order collapsed. Bodies were piled into mass graves or simply left in the streets. You live with this knowledge. The next cough, the next fever, the next swelling could be the beginning of the end. There are no antibiotics, no antivirals, no understanding how disease spreads. Your life is a precarious thread suspended over a chasm of pestilence. The filth is not just on your skin, it is in your water, your air, your very understanding of the world. To be healthy is a temporary state of grace, a brief respite between the constant low-level illnesses and the sudden, terrifying arrival of a mortal sickness. As you wipe the sweat from your brow with a dirty sleeve, you aren't just tired. You are a walking colony of parasites, living in a world of waste, one misstep away from a medical intervention that would be more torturous than the disease it sought to cure. The line between life and death in the Middle Ages was not a line at all. It was a thin, permeable membrane, and you were always on the wrong side of it.
The afternoon sun beats down on the back of your neck as you haul water from the village well. Every muscle screams in protest, but you dare not stop for long. Your place here is not just a matter of geography or occupation. It is a rigid, unchangeable fact of the universe, as fixed as the movements of the sun and stars. You are living inside an invisible cage, its bars forged from custom, faith, and cold, hard power. This is the feudal system, and it governs every aspect of your existence, from the food on your plate to the fate of your soul. You are at the bottom. You are a serf, a villain. You are not a slave, but you are not free. You are tied to the land, and through the land to the lord of the manor. You cannot leave without his permission. You cannot marry without his permission, and if you do, you will owe him a tax. You cannot sell your animal without his permission. You inherit your father's status and his obligations. Your life is a web of duties and payments. You owe the Lord your labor on his domain, the corvée, for 2 or 3 days every week. You owe him a portion of your own harvest, the tithe to the church, and countless other small taxes. To use his mill to grind your grain, his oven to bake your bread, his wine press. There is a tax when your father dies, the Harriet, usually his best beast. There is a tax to inherit your own family's land. You are in a state of perpetual debt, both in labor and in kind. Above you stands the Lord in his manor house. He is your master, your protector, and your judge. His power over you is near absolute. He is a fighting man, a knight, whose primary purpose is warfare. His wealth comes from the land you work for him. His world is one of politics, alliances, and violence. He lives in a stone-built hall, a stark contrast to your wattle and daub hovel. He eats meat daily, drinks wine, and sleeps in a separate chamber. But his life is not one of idle luxury. He is responsible for the defense of the manor, for administering justice in his court, and for answering the call of his own lord, the baron or the king, to provide knights for war. His world is also dangerous, bound by a complex code of honor and loyalty that is often broken. Above him are the greater nobles, the barons and earls, and at the very top, the king. But the king's power is often theoretical. In reality, power is local, vested in the lord of the manor. The chain of loyalty, the oath of fealty binds society together. You serve the Lord serves the king, and the king, in theory, serves God and protects his people. It is a pyramid, and you are the foundation, bearing the weight of the entire structure. And overseeing this entire earthly hierarchy is the church. It is the second great pillar of medieval society, a vast international corporation that owns nearly a third of the land in Europe. The church offers the only path to education and literacy for a boy not born to nobility. It provides the rituals that mark every stage of life: baptism, marriage, death. It controls the calendar with its feast days, fasts, and holy days of obligation that provide the only breaks from work. Its doctrine explains the world. Your suffering is a test. Your station in life is God's will, and your reward for obedience and piety will come in the next life, not this one. To question the social order is not just to rebel against your Lord, it is to rebel against God Himself. This rigid system is enforced by a system of justice that is brutal, public, and deeply personal. There is no police force. There is the Lord's court, held in the manor house where he or his steward presides over disputes between his tenants. Did you let your pig stray into your neighbor's garden? Did you fail to complete your labor service? The court will hear the case and levy a fine. The law is not about abstract justice. It is about maintaining order and the Lord's rights. For more serious crimes, theft, assault, murder, the system is even harsher. The concept of innocent until proven guilty does not exist. The burden is on you to prove your innocence, often through an ordeal. You might be subjected to the ordeal of cold water, thrown into a pond or river. If you floated, you were guilty, because the water, a pure element, had rejected you. If you sank, you were innocent, and hopefully pulled out before you drowned. Or the ordeal of hot iron. You would be forced to carry a red-hot iron bar for 9 feet. Your hand was then bandaged. If after 3 days the wound was healing cleanly, you were innocent. If it was infected, you were guilty. These were trials judged by God, and their outcome was final. Punishment was designed not to rehabilitate, but to deter, and to be a public spectacle. Minor offenses might land you in the stocks or the pillory, locked by your head and hands in the village square, a target for ridicule and for rotten food and dung thrown by your neighbors. For theft, you might lose an ear or a hand. For repeat offenses or more serious crimes, the penalty was death. Hanging was common for thieves and murderers. Execution was a public holiday, a grim lesson for the entire community. There was no prison system as we know it. Dungeons were for holding people awaiting trial or ransom, not for long-term incarceration. The law was local, swift, and physical. It was a tool of the powerful to keep the powerless in their place. This is the cage. You cannot rise above your station. You cannot move to a new town for a better opportunity. You cannot choose a different career. Your life is predetermined. Your value is measured in the labor you can perform and the taxes you can pay. Your body is not your own. It is an instrument of your Lord's will and a vessel for the soul that belongs to God. The constant grinding labor is bad enough, but it is this profound lack of agency, this total absence of freedom, that would crush the modern spirit most of all. You are not an individual with rights and aspirations. You are a serf, a piece of the land, a spoke in a great unchanging wheel. As you look up at the manor house on the hill, you aren't just looking at a building. You are looking at the architect of your reality, the warden of your invisible cage. And the sun continues its slow arc across the sky, marking another day in a life that was mapped out for you before you were even born. As the afternoon light begins to soften, casting long shadows across the village common, a different rhythm takes hold. The relentless, individual grind of labor gives way slightly to the bonds of community. This is not a choice. It is a necessity for survival. In a world devoid of social safety nets, where the individual is fragile and powerless, the family, the faith, and the village are your only shields against a universe of random cruelty. But these bonds are a double-edged sword, offering protection at the cost of absolute conformity. Let's start with the family, the fundamental economic unit of medieval society. It bears little resemblance to the modern nuclear family. Your household is not just your parents and siblings. It may include grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, and even unrelated servants or laborers, all living, working, and sleeping in that single smoky room. Privacy is non-existent. Every cough, every argument, every intimate moment is public knowledge within your own walls. The family is a production team. From the youngest child who scares birds from the fields, to the elderly grandparent who minds the fire and mends nets, everyone has a role. There is no room for sentimentality. Children are not coddled. They are assets, extra hands to lighten the load. This is because childhood is terrifyingly brief and perilous. The specter of infant and child mortality hangs over every family like a shroud. It is estimated that 1 in 3 children died before their 5th birthday. A fever, a bout of dysentery, a fall, a common childhood illness like measles or whooping cough. Any of these could be a death sentence. Parents had to harden their hearts, not from a lack of love, but as a psychological survival mechanism. They often gave the same name to a new baby if an older sibling died, a practice that seems callous to us, but was a pragmatic way to continue a family identity in the face of relentless loss. You grew up watching siblings die. You learned early that life was cheap and fragile. Marriage is rarely about love. It is an economic and social contract, arranged by families to combine land, secure alliances, or pay off debts. For a peasant, it might be a simple agreement between families to join their small plots of land. For the nobility, it is a tool of statecraft. Your feelings are irrelevant. A woman is transferred from the authority of her father to the authority of her husband. Her primary value is in her ability to work and to produce heirs, preferably male heirs, to secure the family line. Failure to do so is grounds for annulment or, at the very least, a life of shame and abuse. And then there is childbirth, the single most dangerous moment in a medieval woman's life. It is her battlefield, and the casualty rates are staggering. Maternal mortality is estimated to have been between 1 and 1.5% per birth. This sounds small, but consider that a woman might undergo a dozen or more pregnancies in her lifetime. Her cumulative risk of dying in childbirth could be as high as 1 in 4. There were no prenatal care, no understanding of infection, no forceps for difficult deliveries. The mother was attended by midwives, women with practical experience but limited knowledge, who relied on folk remedies and prayers. A breech birth, a hemorrhage, a retained placenta, these were almost always fatal. Many of the tomb effigies you see in churches of a knight and his lady lying side by side are a fiction. She often died decades before him in the childbed. A man's diaries from the period frequently mention the heartbreaking reality of being left a widower with a house full of young children.
This constant intimacy with death and suffering is processed through the one unifying force, the Church. Faith is not something you practice on Sundays. It is the very fabric of reality. The world is not a random collection of atoms. It is a divine drama, a constant struggle between God and the devil, played out in every thunderclap, every harvest, and every personal illness. The village church is the physical and spiritual heart of the community. Its bell marks the hours of the day for prayer, matins, lauds, prime, terce, sext, none, vespers, compline. This is the divine office, the rhythm of a monastic life that echoes out into the secular world. The church provides the explanation for everything. A poor harvest is God's punishment for the community's sins. A personal illness is a test of faith or a demonic affliction. A recovery is a miracle, an answer to prayer or a saint's intercession. The landscape is sanctified. Crosses mark boundaries. Holy wells are believed to have curative powers, and local saints' feast days are the highlights of the year, occasions for fairs, feasting, and a rare break from work. This faith is deeply physical and visual. You are likely illiterate. You cannot read the Bible. Your religion is experienced through the senses, the smell of incense, the sound of chanting in a language you don't understand, Latin, the sight of brightly painted frescoes on the church walls depicting heaven and a particularly vivid and gruesome hell. You understand that your life on earth is a fleeting, painful prelude to the eternal life to come. Your suffering has a purpose. It purges sin and prepares you for salvation. This belief is what makes the unbearable bearable. It is the ultimate justification for the rigid social order. To rebel against your Lord is to rebel against the station God has placed you in, jeopardizing your immortal soul. The community itself is your final safety net, but it is a net woven with gossamer and obligation. The village is a tightly knit organism. Everyone knows everyone else's business. There is no anonymity. Your reputation is your most valuable possession. To be shunned or ostracized by the village is a fate worse than death, for you cannot survive alone. This creates immense social pressure to conform. Eccentricity is feared. A woman who lives alone, knows about herbs, or is simply unlucky might be branded a witch. A stranger is viewed with deep suspicion. Yet this same community comes together in times of need. At a bee or raising, the entire village will gather to build a neighbor's new house or barn. During harvest, everyone works together to bring in the crop before it spoils. If a family's breadwinner dies, the community may provide charity, however meager.
This interdependence is the key to survival. It is a world of us and them, and you are fiercely, necessarily, part of the us. So, as the day wanes and you gather with your family and neighbors, the exhaustion is shared. The stories told by the fire, the simple songs sung, the shared pot of ale, these are not just leisure activities. They are the rituals that reinforce the bonds that hold your fragile world together. You are not an individual. You are a son or a daughter, a husband or a wife, a member of this village, a subject of this Lord, and a soul in the care of the Holy Church. Your identity is entirely relational. The weight of this collective existence is immense, offering comfort and crushing individuality in equal measure. The modern longing for personal freedom and self-determination would be seen here as not an aspiration, but as a form of madness, a dangerous and sinful rejection of the divine and social order. In the fading light, you are not yourself. You are a single thread in a vast, ancient, and often tattered tapestry. The sun now touches the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. For you, this signals the end of the workday, but it also marks the beginning of a time of profound vulnerability. The night is coming, and with it a closing in of your world. Your mental landscape is as constrained as your physical one, bounded by a horizon you can see and filled with wonders and terrors you can only imagine. To understand the medieval mind, you must first abandon the map inside your head. Your world is not a globe, not a set of political boundaries. It is perhaps 20 miles in diameter. That is the farthest you are likely to have traveled in your entire life, perhaps to a nearby market town on a holy day. Beyond that lies terra incognita, a land of rumor and legend. The forest a day's walk away is as remote and frightening to you as the depths of the Amazon rainforest. It is the desert, the wilderness, a place outside the order of village and field, home to wolves, bears, outlaws, and perhaps darker, supernatural things. The road that passes through it is not a safe conduit, but a dangerous ribbon through enemy territory. Travel is a perilous undertaking reserved for pilgrims, merchants, soldiers, and outcasts. The roads are not paved highways, but muddy tracks, often little more than enlarged animal trails. In winter, they are impassable quagmires. In summer, they are dust-choked ruts. Banditry is a constant threat. There are no roadside inns in the modern sense. You might find shelter in a monastery, if you are lucky, or in a crude alehouse that is little better than a barn, where you will sleep on a straw-filled pallet alongside strangers and their livestock, your possessions clutched tightly to your chest. This isolation shapes your entire worldview. News travels at the speed of a walking man or a cantering horse. A battle fought 100 miles away might not be known in your village for weeks. The death of a king could be old news by the time you hear of it. Your sense of time is not precise. You tell time by the sun's position, by the crowing of a rooster, by the church bells. The concept of a standardized hour is meaningless. Morning and afternoon are sufficient demarcations. This lack of connection to a wider world makes your local concerns all-consuming. A dispute over a strip of land or the price of a chicken at market is of far greater import than the machinations of princes in a distant capital. And what do you believe exists in those distant capitals? Those lands beyond the sea? Your cosmology is a breathtaking fusion of classical geography, biblical lore, and pure fantasy. The world is often depicted in UTO maps, a flat circular disc with Jerusalem at the center, Asia at the top, Europe and Africa on the bottom halves, all surrounded by a great ocean river. At the edges of the map, in the uncharted territories, live the monstrous races described by ancient writers and embellished by centuries of storytellers. The Blemiae, men with faces on their chests, the Skyopods, who shade themselves with a single giant foot, and the Cynocephali, dog-headed men. The universe itself is a series of concentric spheres, with the imperfect, changeable Earth at the center and the perfect, immutable heavens revolving around it. This is not just a theory, it is a theological fact. The Earth is the stage for the drama of salvation, and humanity is the central actor. Comets, eclipses, and earthquakes are not natural phenomena. They are omens, divine warnings, or portents of great upheaval. The line between the natural and the supernatural is porous. An illness might be caused by a demon. A dream might be a true vision. A saint's relic, a finger bone, a shred of clothing, could genuinely channel divine power and work miracles. This is the mental atmosphere you breathe. It is a world alive with meaning and menace. A simple walk through a dark wood at dusk is not just a physical journey, it is a spiritual test. You might cross yourself, clutch a charm, or say a prayer to ward off the good folk, the fairies and spirits that are believed to inhabit the wild places, who could lead travelers astray or steal their children. Science as we know it does not exist. What passes for natural philosophy is a blend of Aristotle, Pliny, and biblical exegesis. The aim is not to challenge God's creation with experiment, but to understand its symbolic meaning.
Yet, into this static, localized world, tantalizing fragments of a wider reality occasionally drift. The merchant caravan that passes through once a year is a traveling spectacle of the exotic. It brings spices from the Indies, silks from China, and tales from lands you will never see. The pilgrim returning from Canterbury, or the ultimate journey, Jerusalem, is a local celebrity. His stories of great cathedrals and foreign peoples listened to with rapt attention. These are the threads that connect your tiny village to the vast, mysterious tapestry of Christendom and beyond. But for you, as night falls, the world shrinks to the circle of firelight. The vast cosmos, the monstrous races at the edge of the map, the intrigues of kings, all of it recedes. The only reality is the crackle of the fire, the familiar, tired faces of your family, the gnawing hunger in your belly, and the deep, aching fatigue in your bones. Your mind, shaped by faith and fear, by isolation and a deep connection to the small patch of land you work, is not a modern mind. It is a medieval mind, and it is closing down for the night, surrendering to a darkness that is both physical and profound, ready to dream of saints and demons, and to awaken at dawn to the same small, unyielding world. The last sliver of sun vanishes below the horizon, and the world is plunged into a darkness so absolute it feels like a physical substance. This is not the gentle electric glow twilight of the modern world. This is a profound, impenetrable blackness, broken only by the faint, flickering light of the hearth fire and the distant, cold pinpricks of the stars. The end of the day does not mean rest. It means a different kind of struggle, a battle against the night itself. Inside your dwelling, The fire is the only source of light and heat. It is a precious, dangerous commodity. A single stray spark could set the thatched roof ablaze, and in minutes your home, your meager possessions, and perhaps your life would be consumed. There is no fire department to call, only the desperate bucket brigade efforts of your neighbors, which often prove futile. Entire towns and villages burn to the ground with terrifying regularity, a fact of life as accepted as drought or plague. The fire provides a dim, dancing light. You might have a rushlight, a reed dipped in animal fat which sputters and smokes, giving off a feeble, greasy glow and a foul odor. Tallow candles made from animal fat are a luxury. They gutter and smell even worse. Beeswax candles are for the church and the nobility. You will likely never touch one. So you live in a world of deep, shifting shadows. Fine work is impossible. Reading is an unimaginable skill reserved for the clergy and a handful of the elite. Your eyes strain in the gloom, and the constant smoke irritates them, contributing to vision problems and early blindness. This is the time for the simplest, most basic forms of entertainment. There is no noise pollution, no background hum. The silence is immense, broken only by the crackle of the fire, the wind whistling through the cracks in the walls, and the sounds of the night, the hoot of an owl, the howl of a distant wolf, the scuttling of rodents in the thatch. These sounds are not romantic, they are threatening. The dark is when predators, both animal and human, are abroad. To fill the silence and keep the fear at bay, you talk. Storytelling is a vital art. The old ones recount tales heard from their own grandparents, local legends of ghosts and spirits, heroic and heavily embellished accounts of the Lord's grandfather in some long-ago war, moral fables from the Bible or folk tradition. These stories are your history, your news, and your collective memory. They are repeated word for word across generations, a fragile oral chain connecting you to the past. If someone has a musical instrument, a simple flute carved from wood, a stringed lyre or a drum, it is a treasured possession. The music is simple, rhythmic, and haunting. It is not for passive listening, but for communal participation. You might sing ballads of lost love or Robin Hood, the songs providing a rare outlet for collective emotion and a subtle critique of the powerful. Games are simple and physical. You might play a version of checkers with stones on a scratched board, or engage in wrestling or other tests of strength. For children, there are games of tag and hide and seek, but even their play is conducted in the near dark, a training ground for a life of vigilance. This is also the time for crafts that require little light. A woman might spin wool with a drop spindle, her hands working by touch and memory. A man might whittle a wooden spoon or repair a tool. Every moment, even those of supposed rest, is bent towards production. There is no leisure in the modern sense of disengagement. Your free time is merely a different form of work, a quieter, more contemplative toil.
And then there is the drinking. Ale is not just a beverage, it is a food source and a social lubricant. The alcohol content is low, but the consumption is high. It dulls the ache in your muscles, warms your belly against the chill, and temporarily numbs the gnawing anxiety of existence. The alehouse, for those who can spare the penny, is the social hub for men, a place of boisterous conversation, crude jokes, and the ever-present threat of a drunken brawl escalating into serious violence. For a few hours, the weight of serfdom can be forgotten in an alcoholic haze. As the night deepens, the psychological toll of the darkness becomes acute. The medieval mind, steeped in a worldview where the supernatural is real and ever-present, populates the shadows with demons, ghosts, and malevolent spirits. The Church taught that the night was when evil forces were most active. The concept of the nocturnal, a demonic spirit that preyed on sleepers, was widely believed. Sleep itself was feared. Dreams were not random neural firings. They were messages from God, temptations from the devil, or visitations from the dead. Sleeping arrangements only heighten the vulnerability. You sleep in your clothes, huddled together with your family for warmth on the shared mattress of straw. The cold is a constant bedfellow. In the depths of winter, frost forms on the inside of the walls. The damp chill seeps into your bones, and respiratory illnesses are rampant. You are also acutely aware of how easily you could be attacked. Your door is a flimsy barrier of wood. There are no locks that would deter a determined intruder. An outlaw band, a rival lord's men, or even a disgruntled neighbor could burst in, and you would have little defense. This is the long shadow of the medieval day. The exhaustion from 12 to 14 hours of physical labor is profound, but sleep is often fitful and haunted. You drift off to the sound of the wind, wondering if it carries the scent of rain that will ruin the harvest, or the howl of a wolf pack drawing nearer. You wake in the pitch black, disoriented, listening for any sound that is out of place. A creak on the floor, the snort of a nervous animal, the cry of a child. The night is not for rest. It is a trial to be endured, a long, dark tunnel that must be navigated before you can emerge, exhausted once more, into the gray light of another identical dawn. The relentless cycle is the true prison. Work until you drop. Sleep a troubled sleep, and wake to do it all over again, until your body finally gives out. The night does not bring peace. It only brings a different kind of strain, a silent, waiting dread, dawn. The pale gray light filters once more through the cracks in your wall. It is not a welcome sight. It is a summons. Your body, racked with pain and stiff with cold, protests as you drag yourself from the straw. The fire has burned down to embers, and the chill in the room is biting. You have survived the night. This in itself is a victory. But as you face the prospect of another day identical to the last, a profound despair threatens to overwhelm you. This is the true heart of the medieval experience. Not the dramatic battles or the grand cathedrals, but the crushing weight of monotony and the sheer grinding resilience required to endure it. Before we leave you to this fate, it's crucial to understand that this world, for all its brutal hardship, was not a static, silent prelude to our own. It was a complex, vibrant, and ultimately transformative period whose legacy is etched into our modern world in ways we rarely stop to appreciate. The medieval world did not simply end. It fractured, evolved, and laid the foundations for the Renaissance, the scientific revolution, and ultimately the modern age. The most visible legacies are in stone. The great cathedrals, those breathtaking forests of stone and glass that claw at the sky, are the ultimate expression of the medieval mind. They were not built by slaves, but by generations of skilled, free artisans working in a complex system of guilds. The flying buttress, the pointed arch, the ribbed vault, these were revolutionary architectural innovations. Building a cathedral was a community-wide endeavor that could take centuries, a testament to a faith so powerful it can command such sustained effort. These structures are not just churches, they are encyclopedias in stone. Their sculptures and stained glass windows telling the biblical story to an illiterate populace. They represent a monumental investment in the future, a belief in something greater than the suffering of the present.
Our modern universities were born in the Middle Ages. What began as cathedral schools evolved into institutions like the University of Bologna and the University of Paris. Here, scholars debated law, medicine, and theology, using the rediscovered works of Aristotle and other ancient thinkers. While their methods seem rigid to us, bound by scholasticism, they were establishing the framework for systematic inquiry and intellectual debate. The very concept of a degree, of a community of scholars, is a medieval invention. The legal and political structures we take for granted have deep medieval roots. The English Magna Carta, 1215, though originally a peace treaty between rebellious barons and a king, established the crucial principle that the ruler was not above the law. The concept of parliaments and representative assemblies began to take shape as monarchs found it necessary to consult with their most powerful subjects to raise taxes and govern effectively. The idea of the commons, of a body representing the interests of the non-noble classes, however imperfectly, was a medieval development. Even our concept of romantic love, however anachronistically we project it onto the past, was shaped in the medieval court. The troubadours of southern France in the 12th century developed the idea of courtly love, a highly stylized, often adulterous, and entirely literary tradition that placed women on a pedestal and made the knight's noble deeds a tribute to his lady. While it had little to do with the reality of most marriages, it introduced a new emotional complexity into European culture, making love a subject worthy of poetry and song. The nation-state itself is a medieval creation. Out of the fragmented, localized power of feudalism, stronger monarchies in England, France, and Spain began to consolidate power, creating centralized bureaucracies, standing armies, and a sense of national identity that transcended local loyalties. This process was long and bloody, but it created the political units that would dominate the modern world. And finally, there is the legacy in the soul, the psychological and cultural imprint. The medieval worldview, with its emphasis on hierarchy, duty, and the subordination of the individual to the community, stands in stark contrast to our modern cult of individualism. Their profound belief in a universe saturated with meaning challenges our often mechanistic and disenchanted perspective. The sheer physical courage required to face plague, famine, and violence on a daily basis forged a toughness of spirit that is hard for us to comprehend. As you stand there in the cold dawn, you are not just a peasant. You are a part of this great, slow-moving river of history. Your labor is feeding the population that will eventually build cities. Your taxes are funding the kingdoms that will become nations. Your faith is sustaining the institutions that will preserve knowledge through the dark ages. You cannot see it, and it offers you no comfort,
but your suffering is part of a foundation. The modern world, with all its comforts, its medicine, its rights and freedoms, was not a sudden invention. It was painstakingly built, brick by brick, on the backs of millions of people who lived and died in conditions we would find unendurable. They endured not for a future they could not imagine, but for the day-to-day necessities of survival, for their families, for their faith, and for their community. So, as you take your first aching steps into another day, remember this: the distance between your world and ours is not just measured in centuries, but in a fundamental shift in the human condition. We are the beneficiaries of their unimaginable resilience. The ghost of their hardship lingers in our privileges. The medieval world was not a simple time. It was a complex, brutal, and beautiful cauldron in which the modern West was forged. And you, for one more day, are living in its fire. The bell tolls. The Lord Steward is calling. Your strips of land await the plow. The endless cycle continues. You take a deep breath of the smoky, frigid air, and you begin.
The physical hardships of the medieval world are one thing. The psychological landscape you must now navigate is another. Your modern mind, shaped by individualism, instant gratification, and a sense of agency, is being systematically dismantled and reassembled into something else, a pre-modern mind. This is the most profound and disorienting challenge of all. Your sense of self is not your own. The concept of finding yourself is nonsensical. You are your father's son. You are the tenant of this strip of land. You are a subject of this lord. Your identity is entirely relational and derived from your place in the divine and social hierarchy. Your personal desires, your ambitions, your unique thoughts, these are not just unimportant, they are dangerous indulgences. To strive for something beyond your station is the sin of pride, a direct challenge to God's ordained order. Your life's purpose is not to achieve happiness, but to fulfill your duty, to work, to pray, and to endure. The crushing weight of this predestination would induce an existential crisis in a modern person, but for you, it is the only reality. There is no alternative to contemplate, so there is no crisis, only a grim, unthinking acceptance. Your emotional world is also profoundly different. You are in a constant state of what we would now diagnose as high anxiety, but there is no vocabulary for it. It is simply the background hum of existence. You are anxious about the weather, the harvest, the Lord's taxes, the next outbreak of disease, the soul of your dead mother in purgatory. This anxiety is channeled not into therapy, but into ritual. You pray, you touch a relic, you repeat a charm. These actions are not just superstitions, they are coping mechanisms, the only tools you have to exert a semblance of control over a terrifyingly capricious world. Your relationship with time is cyclical, not linear. The year is not a countdown to a future goal. It is an endless wheel of seasons and liturgical feasts. Plowing, sowing, harvest, Christmas, Easter, Lammas. Your father lived this cycle, and your son will live it. There is no progress in the modern sense. The past is not a foreign country. It is the template for the present. The wisdom of the ancients and the church fathers is the final word on all matters.
innovation is suspect. A new way of plowing or a new design for a cart would be adapted with glacial slowness, if at all. Tradition is the ultimate authority. This bleeds into your capacity for empathy, which operates on a much narrower scale. Your circle of concern is your kin and your village. The death of a neighbor's child is a tragedy. The death of 1,000 people in a city 50 miles away is an abstraction, a rumor, perhaps even a divine judgment on their sins. Outsiders are viewed with deep suspicion and often hostility. A traveler with a different accent might be a spy, a heretic, or a carrier of disease. This parochialism is a survival instinct. In a world of scarce resources, your primary obligation is to your own. Violence is not an aberration, it is a commonplace. You have likely seen animals slaughtered, criminals mutilated or hanged, and neighbors brawled brutally. Death is not sanitized or hidden away in hospitals. It happens in the home, in the street. You are desensitized to suffering in a way that would be pathological today. This is not because you are cruel, but because you must be. To be overly sensitive is to be unable to function. The constant presence of death also makes you cherish life less in an individual sense and more as a part of a continuing lineage. Your personal death is less important than the survival of your family name and the salvation of your soul. Perhaps the most alien concept is the lack of boredom. The modern mind, overstimulated and constantly seeking novelty, would shatter in the monotony. But you are never bored. Your mind is occupied with the immediate, all-consuming tasks of survival. The ache in your back, the gnawing in your stomach, the planning of the next day's labor, the repetition of prayers. There is no mental space for boredom to grow. Your imagination is not fueled by movies or books, but by the stories told by the fire and the vivid imagery of the church frescoes, a world of saints, demons, and the terrifying Last Judgment. This is the final and perhaps most complete cage. The bars are not just made of stone and law, but of thought itself. Your mind has been shaped to fit your world, to accept its hardships as inevitable and its hierarchies as divine. To be plucked from the 21st century and dropped here is not just a physical trial, it is a form of psychological torture. You are fighting not just the cold and the hunger, but the very structure of your own consciousness, which is screaming in protest against a reality that demands its own annihilation. As you go through the motions of another day, a part of you is dying, being replaced by a quieter, more resigned, more medieval mind. The transformation is the true price of survival.
The sun has reached its zenith once more. You have completed a full cycle. You have experienced the brutal awakening, the meager sustenance, the back-breaking labor, the ever-present filth and threat of disease, the oppressive weight of the social order, the profound isolation, the terror of the night, and the slow reshaping of your own psyche. So what is the final verdict? Could you last a day in medieval times? The answer is a resounding, unequivocal no. You might physically survive the initial 24 hours, yes, but lasting implies more than a pulse. It implies a functional existence, a capacity to cope, and in that, you would fail catastrophically. Your body would fail first. Your immune system, coddled by modern medicine and sanitation, would be a defenseless playground for a host of bacteria and viruses your system has never encountered. A simple cut,
a scraped knee could lead to a fatal infection. The unfamiliar, nutrient-poor food and contaminated water would wreak havoc on your digestive system, leaving you weak and dehydrated. The sheer physical toll of the labor would injure muscles and joints accustomed to a sedentary life. You would be, by medieval standards, pathetically weak. Your mind would shatter. The lack of agency, the constant, low-grade terror, the overwhelming stench, the crushing monotony, the violation of every concept of justice and human rights you hold dear. This would be a psychological assault far beyond your capacity to endure. The modern mind is built on a foundation of choice, safety, and stimulation. Remove that foundation and it collapses. You would likely descend into a state of catatonic shock, paralyzing anxiety, or hysterical despair, making you useless for labor and a burden on your already strained household. You lack the skills. You do not know how to plow a straight furrow, thatch a roof, butcher a pig, identify edible fungi, treat a fever with herbs, or spin wool into yarn. You are an intellectual in a world that has no use for intellect divorced from practical application. Your knowledge of history, science, or literature is worthless here. In fact, expressing such knowledge could get you branded a heretic or a witch. But beyond the physical and mental, you would fail on a spiritual level. You lack the one thing that makes this life bearable for those who live it, the unshakable, all-consuming faith that this suffering is meaningful. You do not believe your pain purges sin. You do not believe your Lord's authority is divinely ordained. You do not believe that a life of silent obedience guarantees eternal bliss. You see the injustice, the pointless cruelty, the waste of human potential, and that vision, that inability to accept the world as it is presented to you, would be the ultimate barrier to lasting. The day you have just experienced is not an exception. It is the template. Tomorrow will be the same, and the day after. For the next 40 years, if you are lucky. There are no weekends, no retirement, no vacations. There is only the wheel of the seasons, turning relentlessly, grinding you down until you are too broken to continue. The people of the Middle Ages were not weaker than us. They were, in many ways, immeasurably stronger. They possessed a resilience, a fortitude, and a capacity for suffering that we can scarcely comprehend. They lasted not because their lives were easy, but because they had no other choice, and because their worldview provided a framework to make sense of the senseless. You, the modern visitor, have a choice. You have known another way to live, and that knowledge is what makes this existence untenable. You have seen the top of the mountain, and now you're asked to live in the darkest valley, believing it is the only world that exists. So no, you would not last a day. You would break. The miracle is not that you would fail, but that they endured. Their story is not one of a dark age to be pitied, but an age of immense human fortitude to be acknowledged with a shudder of awe. The day ends, the darkness gathers, and for them and for you in this terrible thought experiment, it is a darkness that never truly lifts.
Imagine now that your lot has, by some twist of fate, improved. You are not a serf, but a servant or a minor man-at-arms within the stone embrace of the Lord's castle. You might think this is a step up, an escape from the mud and toil of the village. In some ways it is. In many more, it is a different kind of prison, one of damp stone, rigid protocol, and chilling drafts. The castle is not a luxurious palace. It is a military garrison, an administrative center, and a symbol of raw power. Its primary purpose is defense, not comfort. As you pass through the massive gatehouse, you are immediately struck by the cacophony and the smell. It is a small, crowded town, packed within high walls. There are stables, smithies, kennels, and workshops. The air is thick with the scent of wood smoke, roasting meat, unwashed bodies, and the underlying, ever-present odor of the latrine shafts emptying into the moat or the castle ditch. It is, if anything, more pungent than the village. Your quarters, if you are lucky enough to have a designated space, are in the lower levels of a tower or a cramped room in the outer bailey. It is dark, cold, and damp. The stone walls weep moisture, and the rushes on the floor, changed infrequently, are a fragrant mat of old food, bones, and other less savory debris. You still sleep on a straw pallet, and you are still cold. The great hall where the Lord holds court and meals are served is a vast, cavernous space. In winter, it is perpetually chilly, the heat from the enormous central fireplace struggling to reach the high timbered roof. You are constantly dressed in layers of wool, always slightly damp, always smelling of smoke. The social structure within the walls is, if possible, even more rigid and obsessed with hierarchy than in the village. You must know your place with absolute precision. Who do you bow to? Who do you simply nod at? Where are you allowed to walk? Where are you forbidden? A misstep is not just a social faux pas. It can result in a beating or dismissal. Your life is one of constant, silent vigilance. You serve at the Lord's table. You clean his armor. You tend his horse. The work is less backbreaking than plowing a field, but it is endless and performed under the critical gaze of those above you. And the violence here is more formal but no less real. The knightly class is a warrior caste. Training for war is their daily occupation. The yard echoes with the clash of practice swords, the thud of arrows hitting straw targets. These men are not the romantic champions of song. They are professional, heavily armored killers. A casual bout can turn serious. A perceived insult can lead to a duel. The justice meted out by the Lord in his hall can be as swift and brutal as that in the village. A thief within the household might have a hand severed. A captured enemy knight might be held for ransom, but a common soldier captured in a skirmish might be summarily executed. The castle, for all its imposing strength, is a claustrophobic world. The view from the battlements shows you the land you control, but the walls themselves remind you that you are also under siege by the elements, by boredom, and by the intricate, often deadly politics of the court. You have traded the freedom of the open field for the security of a stone cage, and you quickly learn that the walls are as much about keeping you in your place as they are about keeping enemies out. Perhaps, seeking spiritual solace, you are drawn to the local monastery. Here, you think, will be peace, order, and cleanliness, a refuge from the world's brutality. And in some ways it is. But the monastic life is not an escape from hardship. It is a trade of one form of hardship for another, more disciplined and psychologically complex one.
The first thing that strikes you is the silence. Not the natural quiet of the countryside, but an imposed, profound silence, broken only by chanting, prayer, and necessary work commands. For a modern mind addicted to stimulus, this silence is itself a form of torture. Your own thoughts become deafening. The monastery runs on the rule of Saint Benedict, a schedule of prayer, work, and study known as the Opus Dei, the work of God. The bell tolls in the middle of the night for matins, dragging you from your sleep to shuffle, half frozen, into the dark church for hours of chanting psalms. This is followed by lauds at dawn, and then prime, terce, sext, none, vespers, and compline, structuring the entire day around prayer.
The labor here is different. It is intellectual or artisanal. You might be set to work in the scriptorium, painstakingly copying manuscripts. This is not a quiet, scholarly pursuit. It is physically grueling. You sit for hours in a cold, often dim room, your back and neck aching, your eyes straining to form perfect letters by candlelight. A single mistake on a precious piece of parchment could mean days of work scraped away and started over. The ink freezes in winter. Your fingers grow stiff. Alternatively, you might work in the fields, the brewery, the bakery, or the infirmary. The work is done in silence. Your mind supposed to be fixed on God. This mental discipline, to perform repetitive tasks without letting your mind wander to worldly things, is incredibly difficult. The noise of your modern mind, with its memories, desires, and anxieties, would be your greatest enemy here, a sign of a distracted and sinful soul. And then there is the obedience. You surrender your will completely. You own nothing. You go where you are told, do what you are told, eat what you are given. The abbot's word is law. Your body is disciplined through fasting, vigil, and discomfort. Your diet is meager, especially during the frequent fasts. You are perpetually hungry, perpetually tired. The purpose is to break the self, to mortify the flesh, so that the spirit may flourish. For a modern individualist, this is the ultimate psychological prison. It is a system designed to erase the very concept of the autonomous self. The peace you sought is not a gentle serenity, but the peace of a conquered will. The silence is not calming, but a battlefield where your own ego is the enemy to be defeated. You would last no longer in the monastery than in the village, for the chains here are forged not from iron, but from a devotion so absolute it demands your entire identity as a sacrifice. Let us now assume you are forced to leave the relative, known hardship of your village. Perhaps you are a merchant's apprentice, a pilgrim seeking penance, or a soldier summoned to your Lord's banner. You are about to discover that the world between settlements is a lawless, terrifying expanse where the rules of community break down and survival becomes a moment-to-moment gamble. The road is not a road. It is a track, a ribbon of mud and dust that winds through a landscape that feels actively hostile. In rainy weather, it becomes a sucking quagmire, capable of swallowing a cartwheel up to its axle. In dry weather, the passage of countless feet and hooves grinds the earth into a fine dust that coats your lungs, your food, and your skin. There are no signposts. Navigation is a matter of local knowledge, vague directions, and landmarks that can be obscured by fog or simply misremembered. Getting lost is not an inconvenience. It is a potential death sentence. As you travel,
You are hyper-aware of every sound. The rustle in the bushes is not a rabbit. It is a potential ambush. The fellow traveler you see on the road ahead is not a companion. He is a threat until proven otherwise. Highwaymen and outlaws are a very real and common danger. They prey on the isolated, the slow, and the weak. A merchant's pack train is a rich prize, but even a lone peasant with a sack of grain might be robbed and left for dead for the sheer sport of it. There is no police force to call. Justice, if it comes at all, will be slow and distant. Your primary protection is your wits, your ability to look poor and uninteresting, and the company of others, though even that can be treacherous. Crossing a river is a major undertaking. Bridges are rare, cherished, and often told. Fords are unpredictable. A shallow crossing one day can be a raging torrent the next after an upstream rain. Ferries are unreliable and expensive. Many travelers drown attempting to cross with their goods and animals. The stories of wagons being swept away, of people and livestock disappearing in the churning brown water are common and true. If you find shelter for the night, it is in a wayside inn that is little more than a hovel with a license to sell ale. You will sleep in a common room on a floor of packed earth or straw, packed in with strangers, their animals, and the vermin they carry. You will sleep with your purse tucked into your clothes and one hand on your eating knife. Privacy, safety, and cleanliness are impossible dreams on the road. For the merchant, this life of constant peril is the price of profit. For the pilgrim, the hardship is the point, a physical manifestation of their spiritual struggle. For the soldier, the road leads to the even greater horrors of the battlefield. For you, the modern traveler, it would be a relentless, nerve-shredding ordeal. The sheer, unending vulnerability, the constant calculation of risk, the physical misery of the journey, this would break your spirit as surely as the labor broke your body. The medieval world was not a collection of points on a map. It was the vast, dangerous wilderness in between, and to traverse it was to stare into the abyss of a world without order. It is easy to view the medieval ages as a 1,000-year stasis, a flat line of human suffering between the fall of Rome and the brilliance of the Renaissance. This is a profound misconception. Even in the heart of the Dark Ages, the seeds of the modern world were being sown. The very hardships we've described were the pressures that forced innovation, both technological and social.
The moldboard plow, with its curved plate that turned the soil rather than just scratching it, was a revolutionary invention. It allowed for the cultivation of the heavy, wet but fertile soils of northern Europe, dramatically increasing food production and enabling population growth. This was as transformative in its time as the steam engine would be later. The horse collar, which transferred the weight of a load to the horse's shoulders rather than its throat, allowed the animal to pull far heavier loads without choking. This made horse-powered plowing and transport vastly more efficient, changing the economics of agriculture and trade. In the quiet of the monasteries, monks weren't just praying, they were preserving. They copied not only the Bible and religious texts, but also the works of Aristotle, Plato, and the Roman poets and historians. They kept the flame of classical learning flickering, a tiny, precious spark that would help ignite the Renaissance. The university system, born in the 12th century, created a new class of educated men, clerks, lawyers, administrators, who would slowly begin to challenge the purely military and agricultural basis of power. The Crusades, for all their brutality, were not just a religious war. They were a massive cultural exchange program. Europeans living in the Crusader states encountered a more advanced, sophisticated, and luxurious civilization in the Middle East. They developed a taste for spices, silks, sugar, and new ideas in medicine, mathematics, and architecture. This demand for Eastern goods would eventually help fuel the age of exploration as Europeans sought sea routes to bypass the Muslim middlemen. Even the Black Death, the ultimate symbol of medieval helplessness, had a paradoxical effect. By wiping out up to half the population, it created a severe labor shortage. Serfs suddenly found they had leverage. They could demand wages for their work or simply leave their manor for a village that would pay them. The feudal system, based on tied labor, began to crack under this economic pressure. The old certainties were dying with the people who believed in them. Gunpowder, arriving from China in the later Middle Ages, began its slow, inexorable work of making the knight in shining armor obsolete. The castle, that symbol of feudal power, would eventually be rendered vulnerable by cannon fire. The world was not standing still. It was turning, slowly, grindingly, but inevitably. The pressure cooker of medieval life was, despite itself, creating the conditions for its own destruction and the birth of a new world. You are not just living in an age of stagnation. You are living at the beginning of a revolution so slow that no one living through it can see its shape. The future is being born in the agony of the present.